So my journey with NCN and the Children's Parliament, I will share my story so you will understand what I'm trying to say. But it began in when the tsunami happened in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. And at that time, I was working with Holistic Child Development India, Kindernorth Hilfer, and we started building houses for survivors. And after we had built the houses, we thought, what kind of community program can we have over here? So what I did is I brought a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists from NIMHANS, and they did a lot of psychosocial work, gave treatment to people who were suffering from trauma, etc. And their work started there. But then we thought, what can we do for the children? And that is when I was introduced to Father Edwin and his team of Neighborhood Community Network. And I invited him and a lot of trainers at that point, Father Justice, Mr. Joseph Ratnam, all of them came to the Andamans and we began the Children's Parliament program there. So the Children's Parliament program actually is a very, very wonderful tool which empowers children to become better citizens, and it looks at a whole lot of issues that are being grappled with by vulnerable communities. And this is one forum where children become very self-confident, mature, and learn empathy because of the way the process is within the parliament. So this is actually based on the sociocratic neighborocracy system of governance, and it looks at not only big groups like we see in a democracy, but it looks at very small groups that you find in the neighborhood who can have a voice. Yeah, so the idea behind Children's Parliament comes from Article 12 of the UNCRC, which says that children must have access to decision making, and they should be part of the decision making process, and they have to participate in all those things that matter to them, their lives. Yeah? So again, like I said, there are a lot of other children's groups and forums, but the Children's Parliament incorporates the idea of sociocracy, neighborocracy. That means children from 30 households within a neighborhood come together and form a parliament. And the election system is based on consent. That means children decide who will stand for to become ministers in their parliament. And when they select their ministers, it is always done through consent. That means if any child has an objection, the child will raise an objection, and the person who's standing for elections has to, explain his or her position and tell why he or she can become a good minister for that parliament, right? An able, efficient minister for that parliament. So this is basically the idea, but it is a very, what would I say? It's a very revolutionary, very inclusive kind of a forum, and it is we are very lucky in NCN and other NGOs that we have CBM supporting this kind of program. As you know, CBM supports and is a NGO for children with disabilities, for want of a better word. And when we are looking at inclusive children's parliaments, we are actually looking at children learning to accept diversity and incorporate within them inclusiveness. So the Children's Parliament does just that. Yeah, and it has been our endeavor to make as many NGOs as possible aware of this idea of inclusivity and diversity, including diversity in their programs, especially in the case of children. Yeah? Having said that, what do I like about the Children's Parliament? I like the fact that they are able to think for themselves and they are able to take decisions for themselves. And I have noticed that as the Children's Parliament program proceeds, there's the first month, the first 3 months, then the first 6 months, and a year. I have seen a transformation in children because this is the remotest of places in India and also in the cities like Bombay and Delhi. When children come in, they come in as individuals. But as the months go by, you find that the children have learned to cooperate, they have learned to collaborate, and it is not so much about competition as it is about collaboration, camaraderie, brotherhood, a sense of sisterhood, yeah, and being together, no matter what religion, what caste you come from. I have two stories to share with you. I mean, these are more like case studies. I remember when we began our, I'm talking about a secular India, and this is my story about the secular India that I have visualized and dreamt of, and I'm sure a lot of us do that. In the Andaman, we started our children's parliament in a small village, and I remember how the children all gathered in the house of the Sarpanch, who is a Muslim lady. She was very generous to offer the place to the children. So all the children came and they sat in her courtyard and began the meeting. The meeting started with a secular prayer, and then the children sang Raghupati Raghav Rajaram, Gandhiji's favorite bhajan. And then they also said the Lord's Prayer. So the funding was by a Christian organization. The children were from different communities. They were Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and of different castes. And the place was offered by a woman. And I remember when we made the document, it was children of all these different religions, representing their parliament. So for me, this is very beautiful. Another instance I want to share. I remember I may have shared this story, but this is a very powerful story about children standing for elections in Gujarat. There was a huge meeting and Father Justice was, conducting a training there. And the children all got together in the evening to read out their election manifesto. Each child was sharing how he could become a better minister than the other. Not in the sense of a better minister, but they were reading out the manifesto. So Akash got up and he said, I'm from Jhansi Lakshmi Bai Children's Parliament, and here's my manifesto. And he read out his manifesto. He said, for the children, I will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things as an education minister. He got up, read his manifesto, and sat down. Then the next boy stood up, Rohan. He stood up and read out his manifesto. And after reading it, Rohan stopped and said, you know what? Akshay, I think you can become a better minister than me. So I'm stepping out. Yeah? And I would like you to become the minister for education. I thought none of us adults would have ever thought of doing something like this. But here were children who had that sense and the maturity to allow another person. They saw, this child saw the beauty and the capability in this friend of his, and he allowed him to, take over. In that same group, there was also a child who had a mental disability. He was what you call a Mongolite child, not very severely in that category, but he had an issue. He was but the children encouraged him to read out what he had written on his paper and brought. So he said a few things, and the children all sat there, listened to him, clapped when he had finished. Yeah? And in that same election, I found that there were about 2 children. One who had a visual impairment became a minister. The children encouraged it. And that child said that it is because of my friends today that I have traveled this distance to come to Ahmedabad and to be part of this program. He was a very helpful, a very happy child. So this is the beauty of the Inclusive Children's Parliament. And I would encourage a lot of other NGOs to have this program in their midst, because it gives a lot of joy and gives us a sense of, our dream. You feel like your dream is being fulfilled. Hope that yes, there is going to be a bright India because of the children in the Children's Parliament. And of course, all the duty bearers as adults supporting. I also like to share, I want all of you all to know that this is the fortnight for ending violence against women and children and all vulnerable communities. It starts on the 24th, that is today, 24th November, and it ends on 10th of December, which is the Human Rights Day, International Human Rights Day. So as part of NCN and as part of our women's groups or Optimist International, it's good that we are having this session. So I like to just share that we came up with a study called Girl Power. So these are all prime ministers of the children's parliaments who gave their opinion on what children can do to stop violence, what governments can do to stop violence, and if they became Prime Minister of India, what would they do to stop violence? They have written they've given very interesting observations, and I will share this with Father, and maybe you all can have a copy of that individually for your NGOs. Yeah? So I'll just share one of them with you. If I became the Prime Minister of India, what would I do to improve the country? I will improve educational opportunities. I will eliminate corruption at all levels. I will establish police stations in the villages, and I will provide free education up to college level. So a lot of children are hoping to go to college in the vulnerable communities especially, and higher education is what they want. We will briefly today in the session touch on the new educational policy. What are some of the things that we can do to improve on that, because it's not got, it has been passed, but it will take some time to be implemented. So let us look at what we as NGOs can do to improve on that. Okay. Yeah, so we will now go to what we are supposed to do today, which is goal number 16, which is building peace around the world and building strong institutions of justice. Goal number 16 of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, it's Inclusive Children's Parliaments, Goal 16. What is Goal 16? The whole movement for peace at the United Nations level began with the Paris Declaration after the World War II, 1 and 2. The Paris Declaration ushered in a dialogue for peace after the world wars. Goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Goal is dedicated to the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies. Okay, and the aim is to promote peaceful societies at the national level, and it is collaboration at the international level also, so that we have peace all around the world. How does it relate to the Children's Parliament? Like I was introducing to you, the Children's Parliament was envisioned as a movement for peace by Kees Boyk. He was a Dutch educator, missionary, and pacifist who started the first Children's Parliament and called it Foundation Workshop Children's Community. And this is also the name of the school that he started in the Netherlands. Okay? That's the brief history. We will look at quickly the targets, indicators, and actions for inclusive children's parliaments in relation to goal 16. Yeah, goal number 16. What are the targets? There are 10 targets and 23 indicators for goal 16. I will not be taking up the indicators because there isn't much time, but we will look at the targets because this is important for all NGOs and schools and other institutions to look at, civil society movements to look at. And these are important because it everywhere talks about inclusivity, it talks about representation, it talks about voices that need to be heard if we want peace in the world. Okay? So target number 16.1, it is about reducing violence and related death rates everywhere. That means any kind of violence, whether it is domestic violence, systemic violence, violence due to wars, whatever it is, reducing violence around the world by 2030. I will come to the actions at the end. End abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence and torture against children. This is target number 16.2. Then it is, I need not emphasize that violence against children has been going up, and especially abuse in the form of child labor and trafficking, especially in the COVID times. In these very difficult times, I have personally noticed that child labor has gone up exponentially. And you know, there's a sense of helplessness in all of us. We don't know what to do, but this has to end somehow. And this is a challenge before us. Goal number 16.3, it is promoting law and at the national and international level and ensure equal access to justice. In India, what are some of the institutions that look into law? We have the Human Rights Commission. We have the Women and Child Development Commission. So these bodies we have to strengthen as civil society, as common people, as NGOs, okay? And see that there is access to justice for all. I think we all know that in a country like ours, it is the vulnerable communities that do not get justice. So it has to be our endeavor to somehow see that justice is possible for all of them. And I think the beginning is with our own children, child rights, rights of the girl child. If we look into those aspects and somehow protect our children, then we can look at bigger issues. There is a micro issue and there's a macro issue. So what are some of the institutions in India? Like I said, the Human Rights Commission, the Child and Women Welfare Development Commission, the Niti Aayog. Then at different state levels, there are, bodies, agencies that look into law and order. The police force, for example. So if we can strengthen these bodies, we will have more justice. Then 16.4 is reduce illicit financial arms flow, strengthen recovery and return of stolen assets, combat all forms of organized crime. This is self-explanatory. Illicit financial and arms flow. I think India has been in the midst of a lot of controversies with in relation to illicit financial transaction, money laundering. Yeah, we've had people like Mallya, Nirav Modi, who have run away from India after having gotten involved in all these kinds of financial transactions. Then there have been a lot of controversies we've been involved in as with regard to the arms. Yeah, so we have to have dialogue, and we have to bring pressure as pressure groups so that these kind of things are not repeated. This is one way in which we can bring peace around the world. Then 16.5 is substantially reduce corruption and bribery in all its forms. I've always wondered how India has survived, and we constantly like to point a finger at corruption and bribery. But then I ask a question to all of you all. I know you all are muted, but please, this is a reflection question. Who amongst us is corrupt? Who amongst us is taking bribes? The answer is no. We are not doing that. We as a group that is looking at social development, we are looking at child rights, we are protectors, duty bearers of child and women's rights and so on, and environment. I don't think we are in that space of corruption and bribery. And I like to emphasize here that India is surviving, thriving because of that 10% of the group that is not involved in corruption and bribery. So please, when we point a finger at others, please also remember that there is a group that is not corrupt and not taking bribes, and we need to reward such people. We need to sustain such groups, such people. Okay, and I've seen that personally in the government, in the police, in the judiciary. There are very, very honest people who are holding India up. So again, okay, 16.5 says, let us reduce corruption and bribery at all levels. So let us rejoice that there are people who are non-corruptible and don't take bribes. And let us all endeavor to stop it wherever possible. Yeah? 16.6 talks about effective, accountable, transparent institutions at all levels. That means there are international bodies of finance, of law. So we have to make them accountable. They are answerable to common people. Why? Because we pay taxes, and that is our hard-earned money. And this is our country. We have an ownership, right? We are citizens of this country. Not only we, but the vulnerable groups also. So we have to take them all along. We are talking about inclusivity, and we have to see that these institutions are answerable to us. Okay? They have to be transparent in their transactions. It doesn't mean, oh, WHO, we cannot ask them questions. Okay, UNO, we cannot ask them questions. No, we have to ask them questions. and they have to give us answers. And at the same time, let us also have our solutions ready and at hand. 16.7 talks about responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision making at all levels. Now, is that happening? Are small voices heard? I don't think they are heard. Yeah, are we participating in all decision making of the government, of international bodies? No, it's not happening. So that's where again the children's parliament comes into picture, youth parliaments come into picture, laborocracy comes into picture. That is how voices, small voices can be heard and they can be represented at different levels of the government and at international levels as well. For example, I like to share that the Prime Minister of the Children's Parliaments in India is Swarna Lakshmi, and now she's studying in the UK, and she's visually impaired, but she is one person who has led the Children's Parliaments group very well, and she speaks well for children's parliaments across, and the youth now, of course, she's as a youth she has been a good spokesperson. So I think she's got a voice because of being part of the children's parliaments. So again, I'd like to share that this is a good forum for children to start with, and also for adults to follow. Yes. Okay, 16.8 talks about broaden and strengthen participation of developing countries in the institution of global governance. Very important. Countries of the global south, how much representation do they have in the United Nations, in UNESCO, in all these other international bodies, international the court of the international courts. Somehow we have to see to it that we are represented. When countries go and they are supposed to speak about issues pertaining to their government, they are allowed exactly 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, they are supposed to explain what the problems are and what issues they want addressed. Now, that being the situation in a meeting, in a United Nations meeting, what are the other options open for us? For countries like from the developing countries, how can we make our voices heard, and how can we strengthen our participation? Now, this is something we need to talk about, exchange ideas, share, discuss, and next time we are representing our country in the United Nations, we have to put forth these ideas. Whether it is distributing pamphlets on the streets of New York or and in the building or wherever, but it has to be done using social media, whatever it takes. But we have to see to it that we are represented. 16.9 says by 2030, we have to provide legal identity for all, including free birth registrations. तो यहाँ कहना है कि जो भी बच्चे पैदा होते हैं, उनका birth certificate होना चाहिए, आधार कार्ड होना चाहिए. They must have some legal identity. A lot of children are stateless. They don't know which country they belong to. As refugees, as people on the move, there are nomadic tribes that are on the move. They don't have any kind of identity. And this is a very, very difficult space to be in. It's very challenging for those groups to survive without these registrations. So a legal identity is very important. When we talk about crime and, we say crime is on the rise, the youth are becoming more criminal, the reason is because of this whole identity issue, the identity politics. Yeah, and not having an identity can make life very difficult for people. There is immense stress. There is that feeling of anxiety and not knowing where you belong, who you belong to, and who am I? This question of who am I, right? So legal identity very important. And 16.10 is about public access to information and protecting fundamental freedoms in accordance with national legislation and international agreement. So when we talk about peace and inclusive societies, we are saying that all of us need to have freedom of speech. Our voices need to be heard. The fundamental freedoms have to be protected, okay, in accordance with national legislation and international agreements. So what do international agreements say? If you look at goal 16 and if you look at some of the indicators, you will see that there are lots of comments and commentaries and a lot of description about different types of freedoms. So information is a major one. When you talk about democracy and we talk about governments that allow people to be part of governance, then fundamental freedoms like freedom of speech, expression is a very, very important aspect. And it's mandatory that national governments and international governments protect that. Okay, having said that, let's look at what is really important. Okay, now I know that a lot of you are interested in knowing what actions we can take to fulfill this goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm going to share with you a lot of things now. So I'll be looking here and there. Don't get distracted. Please just pay attention to what I'm trying to share with you. I had the wonderful opportunity to meet a group called Arigato when I went to Geneva. And this group has done a lot of research and work with children across the world. And they came out with a program called Ethics Education. And it's all compiled in this big fat book. It's called Learning to Live Together and Building Peace Across the World. Intercultural and interfaith program on ethics education. Now, what did they find? Their findings I will share with you. But I want to, before that, from my own experience working with children's parliaments and NGOs across India, I've been training about 93 churches and some 115 NGOs in child protection, formulating a child protection policy for the NGOs and schools. And I've visited different parts of India and met a lot of children. And so what I'm sharing now is part of that. And then we will go to this research document and what they have to say. Number one, when you are looking at goal number 16, if you're wanting to build peace, one thing is, I mean, it's about awareness drives among children, parents, schools, all stakeholders. One of the things I found was just talking or sharing, discussing issues of anger, sadness, poverty, irresponsible consumerism, and violence. How is peace disrupted because of these things? Okay, just a simple sharing with groups. Your social workers can sit with these groups and have a little awareness talk with them, and you will find that they will come out with a lot of their own anger, sadness, bitterness. They will talk about poverty. They will talk about how the rich are, becoming more and more consumeristic, and how, because of their selfishness, poverty is on the rise. And then violence. Why does violence happen? How is peace disrupted? So these are issues you can talk about. And instead of just talking about it and leaving them there, opening a box and not putting it back is not a good idea. So let us talk about solutions. What are simple solutions we can have at the neighborhood level? And what are bigger solutions we can have at the national, state level, national level, block level, so on, district level? So solutions, this is something we can note down and keep a track of and see what can be implemented. Then encourage good, number 2 is encourage good practices. Identify good practices within a community. For example, in one children's parliament, I found that the children were leaving water for the birds every afternoon in summer. They would leave water and a few, grains for the birds. Now, this is a beautiful practice. It was not only a practice in reaching out to other forms of living beings, but it is that sense of empathy that they had. and knowing that what are the needs of the animals. Just as we want water, they also want it. So this is a good practice. We can identify that, and you can initiate it in your own, parliaments or your own areas. So encouraging good practices. If you find a community is involved in good practice, award them, acknowledge them. Number 3, sensitivity training. What is sensitivity training? I know that a lot of y'all have given up something to come here today, to listen to my lecture. You have no idea whether I'm going to be useful or not, but you have come here, and I respect that. Yeah? This is, for me, I'm sensitive to the fact that you've given your time and you have you're putting in your efforts, energy to listen to me, and I value that. So valuing another person's time, space, energy is what sensitivity training is all about. And in that, we come to issues of spirituality, ethical living, empathy, building resilience, being joyful, creativity, and compassion. It is found that peace we can have through the arts. Yeah? I will come to that when we talk about the research with children. Arts are a beautiful way in which we can bring peace, songs, music, drama, poetry. Compassion is something we already have within us, but we don't bring it out so much because we are always saying, let me see if you, the other person, is being compassionate to me. If the other person is, then maybe I will think of being compassionate. No, the idea is that compassion begins with us. Yeah, we start from us. Then, like I said, use of arts. Then, yeah, we will come to that. But for India, what are we going to do to bring peace? What are we going to tell our children? What practices do we want inculcated in them, whether they are children from vulnerable communities or from elite families? So personally, I think it is promoting secular values. It is reading the preamble of the Constitution every day, very important. Then spirituality. Then having a casteless society and environmental sustainability. Very important for India, all these, things. I have a reading list for you all. Please read any book by Uma Chakravarti, Dr. Uma Chakravarti. She is a historian who's written very well about the caste system, about different, personalities and gender, history, gender, and so on. And Romila Thapar has been writing a lot about the trends that have taken place in India over the years. Then any book by Babasaheb Ambedkar and to do with caste and his own journey in formulating the Constitution of India. And environmental sustainability, of course, we've got very wonderful people in India who have worked. Vandana Shiva is there. Then recently Anwar Khan, who was a filmmaker, but an engineer and filmmaker. But he's written a book called The Third Wave on environment sustainability. So there are all these wonderful books you can read and share some of this with your children. Okay, I'll pause for a bit and I'll talk to you now about this study, which is by this group called Arigato. And so they are saying that what works with children as far as peace is concerned is case studies. No? Talk to children about case studies. For example, Chris's bad morning. There's one case study I'll quickly read out to you. It was Monday morning and Chris didn't want to get up and go to school. The bed was warm and comfortable and it was cold outside. Also, he knew he hadn't finished all his homework and it had to be handed that day. He opened his eyes slowly and noticed his dog, Prowler, lying on the floor, chewing his brand new snoop. Okay, so when you give case studies like this, you can ask children, why do you think, what is happening to Chris that he doesn't want to get up in the morning to go to school. What is it in the school that is bothering him, right? So children come up with their own ideas, and when they share, it is probably they are sharing their own story about what's happening in their own school, and they are able to sort of relate to what Chris is going through. Okay, this is one method through which you can make children more empathic. Yeah, make them understand what another child is going through. Okay, this is number one. Then they are talking about movies and videos. Please select movies and videos that talk about peace, that talk about empathy, that talk about global love, and show it to children. Even movies and videos about environment, sustainability, how animals treat each other in the jungle, how they play, how they cooperate, and so on. Now, those kind of movies and videos are very helpful in and discussing at the end of it with children what they thought was a lesson they learned. So these are things that you can do to build peace among children. Then they say interfaith knowledge. That means a Hindu child will spend some time in a maybe a Christian or a Muslim family and learn a little bit about the faith of these other religions. Okay, so this interfaith exchange of ideas and understanding of what that faith is all about. That means the gems. Try to make children understand the gems of different faiths. Okay, so they understand that none of the religions are promoting violence. None of the religions are promoting selfishness. All religions are talking about love, compassion, brotherhood, sisterhood, and so on. So when a child learns about another religion, he is able to understand the similarity between his and the other person's religion and appreciate the similarities and also appreciate the difference. He has something new to learn. She has something new to learn from another faith. So this interfaith dialogue, that means schools should encourage this sort of interfaith dialogue at a very young age. Then role playing. Role playing is very important for children to understand that when when you're doing a role play, give them a situation and say, what would happen if you were disrespected as a person? Because respect is a very, very critical and central aspect of building peace, of understanding human rights, yeah, understanding children's rights or gender rights. So when a child learns what respect is, he's able to respect not only himself but others also. So in role play, you put a child in a position where he has to give respect to somebody. So what are some of the things he will say when he has to respect someone? What are some of the ideas that he has to already have before he respects someone? Okay? So this is role play that you can do with children. Then it talks about songs, songs and music. There are beautiful songs and music of each culture, whether it is in Asia, in Africa, Europe. There are beautiful songs on peace, and there are melodious, tunes. For example, drumming is supposed to be is a great stress buster, and when you do community drumming, it builds a sort of camaraderie and a brotherhood. Because drumming is a sort of it's very rhythmic. It's easy to do, but if you have other instruments, it takes some skill and learning. But drumming, you can just begin. So this sort of music can build in the community, in the neighborhood, a sense of brotherhood, and it can bring a lot of peace and joy. It can be very exhilarating when you do this. Then another thing they talk about is storytelling. Have children either bring up their own stories or to learn a story from their culture, which is about peace, love, brotherhood, compassion. Okay? It could be either about children or it could be about animals or plants. Yeah? So storytelling is a good way. Then there's another one. Here, they said the children loved one story very much. I'll just read this out to you. A woman went to live in a new town, and as she came to the gate, The gatekeeper asked her, "What were the people like in the town you have traveled from?" She replied, "They were bad-tempered, quarrelsome, gossiping, and generally unpleasant." The gatekeeper then said, "You will find the people here just as bad, so I suggest you go on your way." A second woman came along and the gatekeeper asked her the same question, to which she replied, "The people in the town I have traveled from were kind and caring. They were brave in times of trouble. They were always willing to share with me and to welcome strangers." The gatekeeper then said, "Come in, for you will find the people here just as welcoming as you." Now in this era where there is so much of negative news reporting and there is all this dismal stuff that we hear all the time on social media or on the television or everywhere else, please, I think we have to remember all the good things that we have in our neighborhood, in our city, in our country, and try to project that in our stories. When we tell children stories of valor, of courage, of resilience, they learn that yes, that's a possibility. Yeah, and I can have a future that is full of courage, resilience, and yeah, there are positive things in my environment. For example, children in India are surrounded by symbols of life. We have schools, we have colleges, we have temples, mosques, churches. These are all pro-life symbols that our children see around us. Compare that with children in the Palestine or in some of these Balkan countries where there has been mass destruction, genocide, and so on. What kind of symbols do they see? They see arms, ammunition. They use stones to, play, and when they are playing, they use wooden planks and use it as a gun. These are symbols that children see around them. What happens is in the frontal lobe and in the brain, these images remain fixed for the children, and they are not able to get away with those images. So violence becomes a part of their life. Whereas when children have positive symbols, pro-life symbols, they know that yeah, there's a different way of living also. So let's have more positive symbols around. Then we have prayers and affirmations. So very important to have prayers of peace and secularism. Just one prayer I will read. If anyone speaks ill of you, praise them always. If anyone injures you, serve them nicely. If anyone persecutes you, help them in all possible ways. You will attain immense inner strength. You will control anger and pride. You will enjoy peace, poise, and serenity. You will become divine. Children have loved this prayer, and they say this every day. In this particular study, which was done around the globe, all over the world, they love this prayer. And then affirmation. An affirmation is saying to yourself every day that all is well. The world is a beautiful place, there is abundance, and all is well. It is not stupidity, it is not naivety, but it is affirming to yourself so that all your actions are positive and you will do something about the injustices and the violence. You will take action to prevent violence. You will take action to live a rational life, to lead a more peaceful and joyful life. If you affirm to yourself every morning this positive affirmation, that all is well, and I have a healthy body, I have a healthy mind, and I will go out in the world and bring more positivity and peace around me. I am an agent of change, and I am an agent of peace. Okay? And then they also talk about poems. Poems, they say, are very important. Songs, poems, storytelling. There was one very beautiful poem that I thought of reading, but maybe we can come to it later. I want to now, have you all please sit up straight, close your eyes, and we will do a small breathing exercise. Because when we talk about peace, the peace is really within us and we fail to recognize that. So there is a beautiful part of us in our heart which is always peaceful. And breathing is important because that is what indicates to us that there is life, and let us all be pro-life. So please sit with your back straight. Do not open your eyes immediately. Always rub your palms together, place them on your eyes before you open your eyes in them. So what I want you to do is take a breath in and count 4, hold it for 7 counts, and breathe out 8. Okay, we will do this 3 times. Please remember, before you begin any session with your children, always make them center, bring them to the present. And this is a very good breathing exercise through which you can bring them to the present. And also when you are personally stressed, you can try this and it will help you come out of your stresses or strains or sadness. Okay, so let's begin. Please sit with your back straight, close your eyes, and when I say breathe in, it is 4 counts in. So 1, 2, 3, begin. Breathe in. Hold it for 7 counts. Breathe out 8. Breathe in. 4 counts. Hold for 7 counts. Breathe out. 8 counts. Breathe in, keep your eyes closed. 4 counts. Hold for 7. Breathe out 8. Rub your palms together, place them on your eyes and open your eyes slowly. Yeah, so this stillness that we experienced for some time, I'm sure you all felt a bit still. There was a pause. So this pause is very essential to build peace, and especially training children that they have to learn to pause and become objective and watch and not react immediately. This is one way in which you can prevent violence, anger, sadness, depression, and the result of depressions being suicides, result of anger being violence, sadness being unproductivity. So if we can just train these children in these small practices, we can build peace around them and peace around the world. I again like to emphasize that violence against girls and women has been going up, and the only way we can prevent this is by raising our boy children to be more tolerant, to be less aggressive, and building in them that the empathy and a value for ethical living and a value for justice, peace, and caring. Yeah? Very important for us to do. We now go to quality education. There is a new government policy. Say you can have a 60-page summary, which I would recommend that you all read. And there is a 300-page document that you can read. Now, what I like to just emphasize is that the new education policy now also looks at early childhood care. So a lot of Anganwadi teachers will now be trained in formal, how to impart formal education and so on. So let us all as NGOs come together and help these teachers, Anganwadi teachers, to empower themselves in our own way. So this is a nice part of the education policy. It's also looking at vocational training at an early stage, and it is also learning. It is also helping children to choose their subjects when they come to the 10th standard level, the higher secondary level. So these are some of the good features of the education policy. But we as NGOs and people working for child rights and women's rights have to look at it critically and give our observations on how it can be developed better. Now, personally, I feel the issue of language is coming in here now. They are saying that give a lot of emphasis to the mother tongue, which is great, which is fantastic. We have lovely languages in India, and I think children should learn that. But if children don't learn English, they are going to be left behind. And again, the divide between the rich and poor will start growing. So wherever possible, I think we have to teach children English and computer skills and empower them, especially vulnerable children, so that we reduce this gap. From my own experience, I can tell you, I've been teaching at the university level, and in my MA class, I would have these children come in, and all they could understand was Marathi. And I would teach them in Marathi, I didn't mind. And I found out that these boys, these 4 or 5 boys, had topped their class when in their BA level. They had got amazing marks, but when they came to MA, just because they didn't know English, they were getting poor marks. Their ideas could not be put on paper. Now, this was a very unfortunate thing to happen, and that's where I think we have to all step in and train our children in English language. Please don't get me wrong, don't misquote me. I'm not saying that we have to follow any particular style or pattern, but I feel very bad for children who just get left behind because they don't know a language. And computer skills. Now I think this era has, after COVID especially, I don't know if this is some kind of a worldwide conspiracy or what, but computer skills are going to become very important, and the use of the internet and so on. So anyhow, I think we have to ask our donors to see that they give us money so that children are better equipped with computer skills. Once again, I like to emphasize, I did last time in my lecture on child protection, please make children understand that they are the masters of the device. The device is not their master. So they have to learn to control their addictions, and they have to learn to use the device for their own benefit and not the other way around. Okay. The goal of education is, I know I'm going to be sort of I'm stating the obvious, but the goal of education, like Howard Gardner, he was a great educationist and a Harvard trained professor who brought into the education arena the concept of multiple intelligences. Yeah, and he always said that any education should build in children these 5 frames of mind. Yeah, it's not just about IQ being 140 or 130 or whatever, but it is, education should ideally build in our children a disciplined mind. That means a child should know how to discipline his mind to learn a subject, to focus. A synthesizing mind, that means a child should be able to gather from different subjects what he needs for his life. A creating mind, that means a mind that can create new things. I don't know if you remember, but some students in Africa had produced electricity through urine. They had collected gallons of urine and they had produced electricity. Now that's amazing creativity. Also in India, if you have noticed, there are lots of science fairs and children have come up with a lot of amazing new gizmos and different types of devices that can be used in common life. So I always question what our scientists are doing in ICMR or wherever. With all due respect to them, I would like to know more about their research and see that it is accessible to common people. So the same way, children, in children, if we can build creativity, we would have done our bit as duty bearers. Then a respectful mind. A child should learn to respect diversity. A child should learn to include other people in his midst. Okay? So they say if by the age of 4, if a child is not accepted as a friend in his neighborhood, then we have done something wrong with his childbearing, in his childbearing practices, Okay? So a respectful mind. A child should learn to respect himself and others. Then ethical mind. Ethical mind means following the rules, having integrity, and not getting into cheating, bribery, and sophistry, and all of that. So ethical living. So the goal of education, like Howard Gardner says, should be these 5 things. Please read his book called Five Frames of Mind. It's a beautiful book, and also his book on multiple intelligence. Having said that, I will stop here for now. I've exceeded, I think, a bit. But before I go, just want to share with you that when I went to Geneva, I went to the museum there, the Red Cross Museum. When I went in, I was very excited. I was like a child because this was a state-of-art museum, and I was so thrilled. It was like everywhere there were earphones and there was music, videos. I went in, and when I came out after 1.5 hours, I had no energy left mental. I was so sad. I was so low on energy because I saw all the destruction that had taken place in the World War I, World War II. It's all depicted there of people who have gone missing, of refugees, of what war has done to people and so on. That shocked me. Then I made a small video in which I compared the Red Cross Museum to the Gandhi Memorial which we have here in Pune. So we can attain peace through two ways, either through violence or through non-violence. Yeah? So it's our choice really. But do we really have a choice? We don't have a choice. Let's get our peace through non-violent ways, and let's train our children to be more empathic, and to learn to protect their environment, and to live in peace with everyone around them, no matter how diverse we may be. Having said that, thank you very much to each one of you for being here. I thank Father Justice for this opportunity. Thank you, Father Justice, and MCM and CBN especially for giving us this forum and supporting our work with Children's Parliaments.